planet Uranus. Uranus, the third largest planet in our solar system and the seventh from the Sun, is extremely chilly and windy. The ice giant rotates at a nearly 90-degree inclination from the plane of its orbit, encircled by 13 hazy rings and 27 tiny moons. Uranus appears to spin sideways while orbiting the Sun due to this unusual tilt. Astronomer William Herschel made the discovery of Uranus in 1781, the first planet to be located with the use of a telescope, despite initially believing it to be either a comet or a star. 2 years later, in part as a result of observations by astronomer Johannes Bode, the object was unanimously acknowledged as a new planet. How did Uranus get its name? William Herschel unsuccessfully attempted to give his find the name Georgium Sidus in honor of King George III. Instead, as recommended by Johannes Bode, the planet was given the name Uranus after the Greek sky god. Is there a chance that life could exist in Uranus? The atmosphere of Uranus is inhospitable to life as we know it. Most likely, organisms cannot adapt to the extreme and volatile temperatures, pressures, and materials that make up this planet. How big is Uranus and how far is it from our Sun? Uranus has a radius that is 15,759.2 miles wider than Earth. Uranus would be roughly the size of a softball if Earth were the size of a nickel. Uranus is 19.8 astronomical units from the Sun, or 1.8 billion miles away on average. The distance between the Sun and Earth is 1 astronomical unit, or AU. Sunlight travels from the Sun to Uranus in 2 hours and 40 minutes from this distance. How does Uranus orbit the Sun? How about its rotation? On Uranus, a day lasts roughly 17 hours, the time it takes for Uranus to rotate or spin once. And it takes Uranus roughly 84 Earth years to complete one orbit of the Sun, or 1 year in Uranian time, 30,687 Earth days. With a tilt of 97.77 degrees and the only planet whose equator is almost at a straight angle to its orbit, Uranus may have collided with an Earth-sized object long ago. The most intense seasons in the solar system are brought on by this peculiar tilt. The Sun shines directly over each pole for over a quarter of every Uranian year, sending the other half of the planet into a 21-year-long, gloomy winter. Uranus is also one of just 2 planets that rotate in the opposite direction than most of the planets. Venus is the other one, from east to west. Are there moons in Uranus? There are 27 known moons of Uranus. The moons of Uranus are distinctive in that they are named after characters from William Shakespeare and Alexander Pope, unlike the majority of satellites that orbit other planets whose names are derived from Greek or Roman mythology. All of Uranus' inner moons seem to be made up roughly equally of rock and water ice. The outer moon's makeup is unclear, however it is likely that they are asteroids that have been captured. Does Uranus have rings like Saturn? 2 rings are present on Uranus. 9 rings make up the inner structure, and the majority of them are narrow, dark gray rings. The outermost ring is blue like Saturn's E-ring, and the outer ring is reddish like other dusty rings in the solar system. The names of the rings are Zeta, 6, 5, 4, Alpha, Beta, Eta, Gamma, Delta, Lambda, Epsilon, Nu, and Mu, with Zeta being the closest to the planet. Belts of fine dust encircle some of the larger rings. How was Uranus created? When the solar system as a whole began to form, roughly 4.5 billion years ago, swirling gas and dust were drawn in by gravity to form the ice giant that is today's Uranus. Uranus, which is the 7th planet from the Sun, likely formed closer to the Sun like its cousin Neptune and traveled to the outer solar system around 4 billion years ago. What's inside Uranus? One of the 2 ice giants in the outer solar system is Uranus, the other is Neptune. Around a tiny rocky core, a hot, dense fluid of icy components like water, methane, and ammonia makes up the majority, 80% or more, of the planet's mass. It can reach 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit towards the core. Despite having a smaller mass, Uranus has a slightly larger diameter than its neighbor, Neptune. Saturn is the least dense planet, making it the second least dense after that. Due to the presence of methane gas in its atmosphere, Uranus has a blue-green tint. Sunlight enters the atmosphere of Uranus and is reflected by its cloud tops back out into space. Blue-green light is produced when methane gas absorbs the red component of the light spectrum. Is there a place to land in Uranus? Since it is an ice giant, Uranus lacks a real surface. Much of the planet is made up of fluid swirls. A spacecraft wouldn't be able to fly through Uranus' atmosphere unharmed, but it also wouldn't have anywhere to land. A metal spaceship would be destroyed by the intense pressures and temperatures. Is the air breathable in Uranus? With a little quantity of methane, traces of water, and ammonia, the atmosphere of Uranus is primarily composed of hydrogen and helium. Methane is responsible for Uranus' distinctive blue hue. More recent observations show that Uranus has dynamic clouds as it approaches equinox, including fast-changing bright structures. Voyager 2 observed only a few discrete clouds, a great dark spot, and a small black patch during its flyby in 1986. In some places, Uranus' planetary atmosphere is even colder than Neptune, with a minimum temperature of 49 K or -224.2 degrees Celsius. On Uranus, wind gusts can reach a maximum of 560 miles per hour. At the equator, winds are retrograde, moving in the opposite direction of the planet's rotation. However, as one gets nearer the poles, the wind changes to a prograde direction and moves with Uranus' rotation. Are there auroras on Uranus? The magnetosphere of Uranus is unusually formed. The magnetic axis of Uranus is tilted about 60 degrees away from the planet's axis of rotation and is also displaced from the planet's center by a third of its radius. Magnetic fields are generally aligned with a planet's rotation. The lopsided magnetic field on Uranus causes auroras to not line up with the poles like they do on Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn. Millions of miles of space are covered by the magnetosphere tail that follows Uranus to the other side of the Sun. Uranus' sideways rotation causes its magnetic field lines to twist into a long corkscrew shape.